I was polishing my late husband's wedding ring at the kitchen sink when I heard my son Michael tell his wife Jessica that I was worthless here, just taking up space. At 72 years old, with arthritis making my hands shake as I held that simple gold band, I thought I'd heard every cruel thing a family could say about the woman who sacrificed 43 years raising them. I was wrong. What happened next would shock everyone who knew me as the quiet grandmother who never asked for anything. But they forgot something important about quiet women from Texas. We don't just keep house. We keep records. The morning sun filtered through my kitchen window in Plano, casting long shadows across the breakfast table where I'd served thousands of meals to ungrateful mouths. My arthritic fingers trembled slightly as I set down Harold's ring next to his photograph. 47 years of marriage, and now 3 years since the cancer took him, leaving me in this big house that suddenly felt too empty and too full at the same time. I could hear them in the living room, my son Michael and his wife Jessica, speaking in those hushed tones that weren't quite hushed enough. They thought my hearing was going along with everything else they assumed was failing about me. They were wrong about that too. She's becoming a burden, Michael. Jessica's voice carried that sharp edge I'd learned to recognize over the past year since they'd moved in to help me manage. The irony wasn't lost on me. She shuffles around all day, cooking meals nobody wants, cleaning things that don't need cleaning. It's like living with a ghost who won't leave. I said nothing. I'd learned the power of silence from my grandmother, who used to tell me that a woman's greatest strength often lies in what she chooses not to say. I continued polishing that ring, each circular motion a meditation, each gleam a memory of better times when respect came naturally in families. Mom's always been difficult, Michael replied, and I could picture him running his hand through his thinning hair the way he did whenever he was working up to something unpleasant. But she's my mother, Jess. Dad made me promise to take care of her. Take care of her, yes, but not enable her to control our lives from beyond the grave. Jessica shot back. She acts like she owns this place. The ring slipped from my fingers, clattering against the porcelain sink. In that moment, something crystallized in my mind with startling clarity. She acts like she owns this place. If only they knew how right she was, and how wrong they both were about who exactly owned what in this house. I dried the ring carefully with a soft cloth, the same way I'd dried their tears when they were children, the same way I'd dried dishes after family dinners when laughter filled these rooms instead of resentment. The weight of it in my palm reminded me of promises made and promises broken. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, overlooked despite everything you've given, you're not alone. Please subscribe to hear more stories that finally give voice to the silent ones. These aren't just stories. They're the truth too many mothers carry quietly. That afternoon, while they were out running errands, which I suspected meant complaining about me to anyone who would listen, I climbed the stairs to Harold's old study. Each step was deliberate, measured. My knees protested, but my resolve was stronger than any physical discomfort. I had work to do. The study smelled of leather and old books, exactly as Harold had left it. His reading glasses still sat on the mahogany desk, folded beside a half-finished crossword puzzle. I touched them gently, remembering how he used to look over those glasses at me with such love, such partnership. We'd been a team for 47 years, and even in death he was still protecting me. I pulled out the key I wore on a chain around my neck, the one Jessica had commented on dismissively as another one of her old lady quirks. This key opened the locked drawer in Harold's desk, the drawer that contained documents they'd never seen, papers they'd never known existed. Inside were manila folders, each labeled in Harold's careful handwriting. Property deeds, investment portfolios, life insurance policies, trust documents. My hand steadied as I opened the first folder. Harold had been meticulous, bless him. Every piece of paper was exactly where it should be, every signature notarized, every date recorded with the precision of a man who knew he might not be around to explain things later. The house deed, dated 1987, showed joint ownership. Harold Eugene Henderson and Dorothy Mae Henderson. When Harold died, full ownership had transferred to me automatically. I owned this house outright, all 3,200 square feet of it, plus the 2-car garage, the half-acre lot, and the mineral rights underneath. Current market value in Plano, $847,000. I said nothing when they returned home that evening, laden with shopping bags they couldn't afford on Michael's insurance salesman's salary. I said nothing when Jessica complained about the pot roast I'd spent 3 hours preparing. I said nothing when Michael suggested again that I might be happier in a retirement community where I could make friends my own age. But I was listening. And I was remembering every slight, every dismissive comment, every time they treated me like an inconvenience in my own home. The next morning, Jessica made her first real mistake. I was watering my African violets on the kitchen windowsill when she walked in, still in her bathrobe, hair wild from sleep. She thought I was absorbed in my plants, lost in the simple tasks that she assumed filled my empty days. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister Karen. I knew it was Karen because Jessica always used that particular tone with her, conspiratorial, gossipy, cruel. "You should see her this morning," she whispered, gesturing toward me as if I were deaf as well as worthless. "Fussing over those stupid plants like they're children. It's pathetic, really. A woman her age should have more dignity than to cling to life so desperately." I nearly dropped the watering can. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I wasn't clinging to life. I was living it, fully and deliberately, despite their efforts to make me feel like a burden. "Michael keeps saying we have to be patient," Jessica continued. "But I'm telling you, Karen, this can't go on much longer. She's worthless here, just taking up space we need for our future. When she finally, passes on, we can turn this place into something beautiful. Maybe knock out a wall, put in that kitchen island I've been wanting." I set the watering can down with exaggerated care, my hands steady now despite the rage burning in my chest. She was redecorating my home in her mind, planning my death like a home improvement project. The disrespect was breathtaking in its casual brutality. I said nothing. That evening, I called my lawyer, Robert Steinberg, a man Harold and I had trusted for over 20 years. His voice was warm with genuine concern when he heard from me. "Dorothy, how are you holding up? I know these past few years have been difficult." "I'm managing, Robert. But I need to discuss some legal matters with you. Can we meet tomorrow?" "Of course. Is everything all right?" I paused, listening to the sounds of my family upstairs, my son and his wife planning their future in my home, discussing my inconvenience to their plans. "Everything is about to be much clearer," I told him. The next day, Robert's office felt like a sanctuary. The law books, the mahogany furniture, the certificates on the walls. Everything spoke of order, of justice, of things being done properly. Robert was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd handled Harold's estate, understood our family dynamics, knew exactly what I was facing. "I need to understand my legal position regarding my home and my finances," I told him without preamble. "And I need to explore my options." Robert spread Harold's documents across his desk like a tactical map. "Let's start with the basics, Dorothy. This house is yours, free and clear. The deed shows sole ownership as of Harold's death. No one can force you out, and no one can make decisions about it without your explicit consent." He opened another folder. "Now, regarding the investment portfolios Harold set up," his finger traced down a column of numbers. "The market has been very good to you, Dorothy. The mutual funds, the blue-chip stocks, the treasury bonds, they've grown considerably since Harold's passing." My breath caught as he showed me the totals. $2.3 million. Harold had been even more careful with our money than I'd realized. We'd lived modestly, saved diligently, invested wisely. I was not just comfortable. I was wealthy. "They don't know about any of this, do they?" Robert asked gently. "They think I'm living on Social Security and Harold's small pension. They think I'm poor." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying me with those kind, intelligent eyes. "Dorothy, what exactly is happening at home?" I told him everything. The conversations I'd overheard, the casual cruelty, the way they discussed my death like an inconvenience to be endured. Robert's expression grew increasingly grave. "You have options," he said finally. "More options than they could possibly imagine. If this is making your blood boil, if you're feeling that righteous anger on my behalf, hit that like button. Because respect isn't optional, even for the elderly. Especially for the elderly." That night, I sat in Harold's chair in the living room, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold in my hands, and made my decision. I wasn't going to argue with them, wasn't going to defend myself, wasn't going to beg for basic human decency in my own home. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to let them show me exactly who they were, and then I was going to respond accordingly. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning while I was making pancakes from scratch, the way I'd made them every Thursday for 43 years, Jessica came downstairs in a fury. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup perfect, but her expression was ugly with frustration. "Dorothy, we need to talk," she announced, not asking, not requesting, but demanding my attention like I was a servant. "Good morning, Jessica." I replied calmly, flipping a golden pancake. Would you like breakfast? I don't want your food, she snapped. I want to discuss your living situation. I continued cooking, my movements deliberate and calm. My living situation seems quite comfortable to me. Well, it's not comfortable for us. Her voice rose to a shout. This is supposed to be our fresh start, our chance to build something together, and instead we're stuck babysitting a woman who can't accept that her time is over. I set down the spatula and turned to face her fully. I'm sorry you feel that way. Sorry. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're sorry? Dorothy, you're worthless here. You contribute nothing, you just shuffle around making messes and creating work for people who have real lives to live. You're like emotional clutter that we can't throw away because you're Michael's mother. The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. I see. Do you? Do you really see? Because I don't think you understand how desperate this situation has become. We can't afford to keep carrying dead weight forever. Michael appeared in the doorway, clearly awakened by the shouting. Jess, what's going on? I'm telling your mother the truth for once instead of tiptoeing around her feelings. She needs to face reality. Michael looked uncomfortable, but didn't defend me. That silence spoke volumes. What reality would that be? I asked quietly. Jessica's eyes gleamed with something cruel and triumphant. The reality that this house is too big for one old woman who doesn't contribute anything to the household. The reality that we're wasting money keeping you comfortable when we could be building our future. The reality that maybe it's time for you to consider other arrangements. Other arrangements? A nice retirement home. Somewhere with people your own age, activities, medical care if you need it. Somewhere you could be happy instead of just existing. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. And what would happen to this house? We'd take care of it, Michael said quickly. Make sure it's maintained, handle all the responsibilities. We'd make it into a real home, Jessica added. Somewhere we could raise children, build memories. Instead of it being this museum to the past. I looked around my kitchen. The kitchen where I'd taught Michael to make cookies, where I'd kissed Harold goodbye every morning for 47 years, where I'd received the phone call telling me the cancer had won. Museum to the past. As if love and memory were dusty artifacts instead of the foundation of everything worthwhile. I understand, I said finally. Jessica's face lit up with victory. You do? Really? I understand perfectly. What I'm about to tell you next shocked everyone who heard it. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because these stories of quiet courage are exactly what the world needs to hear right now. I understand that you see me as an obstacle to your happiness. I understand that my presence in my own home inconveniences you. I understand that you're counting on my death to improve your financial situation. My voice remained calm, almost conversational. What I don't understand is why you think I have to cooperate with that plan. The kitchen fell silent except for the slight sizzle of the pancake burning on the griddle. Mom! Michael started, but I held up my hand. I also understand that you believe I have no options, no resources, no power in this situation. That's where you're both very, very wrong. Jessica's confident smile flickered. What do you mean? I mean that I am not the helpless old woman you think I am. I am not dependent on your charity. And I am not going anywhere. Dorothy, you can't force us to live like this forever, Jessica said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. You're absolutely right, I agreed. I can't force you to live like this forever. But fortunately, I don't have to. I walked to Harold's study and returned with a single folder. I placed it on the kitchen counter and opened it to the first page. The house deed, with my name clearly visible as sole owner. Michael's face went pale as he read. Mom, what is this? This is the deed to this house. As you can see, I own it. Entirely. Harold left it to me free and clear when he died 3 years ago. Jessica grabbed the paper, her eyes scanning frantically. This has to be a mistake. We've been paying the utilities, the insurance. No, I corrected. I've been paying the utilities and insurance. The checks come from my account. You've been living here rent-free as my guests. Guests? Jessica's voice cracked. We moved in to take care of you. Did you? Or did you move in because Michael lost his job last year and you couldn't afford your apartment anymore? The truth hung in the air like smoke. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. It doesn't matter, Jessica said, recovering her composure. You're still old, you still need help, and we're still your family. You can't just throw us out. You're right again, I said. I can't just throw you out. But I can give you notice to vacate my property. 30 days, as required by Texas law for residents without a lease agreement. Mom, you can't be serious, Michael pleaded. I am absolutely serious. Jessica has made it clear that I am worthless here, that I contribute nothing, that I am dead weight preventing you from building your future. I'm simply giving you the opportunity to build that future somewhere else. Jessica's mask finally slipped completely. You can't do this. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't have money for a deposit or first month's rent. That's unfortunate, I replied. Perhaps you should have thought of that before calling me worthless in my own home. This is insane, Jessica screamed. You're a crazy old woman who can't accept that her time is over. My time is not over, I said quietly. But your time as guests in my home certainly is. I walked to the phone and dialed Robert Steinberg's number. When he answered, I spoke clearly enough for them both to hear. Robert, this is Dorothy Henderson. I need you to prepare an eviction notice for my son Michael Henderson and his wife Jessica Henderson. Yes, I'm certain. 30 days from today. Yes, I'll be fine. Thank you. I hung up and turned back to find them both staring at me, as if I'd grown a second head. The notice will be delivered tomorrow, I informed them. I suggest you use the next 30 days to find suitable accommodations and employment. Mom, please, Michael said, and for the first time in months, I heard genuine respect in his voice. We can work this out. We can change. Can you? Can you really change the fact that you sat quietly while your wife called me worthless? Can you change the fact that you discussed my death like a real estate opportunity? Can you change the fact that you've spent months making me feel like a burden in the home I've lived in for 36 years? He had no answer for that. This is exactly why you should never underestimate a quiet woman who's kept records for decades. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's been made to feel small in their own life, please share this video with them. Over the next 30 days, I watched my son and daughter-in-law transform before my eyes. The arrogance disappeared first, replaced by a desperate friendliness that would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. Jessica began cooking meals she thought I'd like, complimenting my clothes, asking about my day with a brightness so forced it made my teeth ache. Michael started helping with household chores without being asked, engaging me in conversations about the past, sharing memories I suspected he was making up on the spot. They were both trying so hard to prove their worth that they'd forgotten why they were in this position in the first place. But I said nothing about their efforts. I was polite, cordial even, but I didn't waver in my decision. Mrs. Henderson, Jessica said one morning, catching me as I tended to my African violets. I wanted to apologize for some of the things I said. I was stressed, overwhelmed. I didn't mean them. I looked at her carefully. She'd lost weight over the past few weeks, and there were dark circles under her eyes. What exactly are you apologizing for? She squirmed under my steady gaze. For saying you were worthless. For suggesting you should leave your own home. For not appreciating everything you've done for us. I see. And what has changed? Are you no longer stressed? No longer overwhelmed? I've realized that I was wrong. That you're not a burden, your family. I nodded slowly. That's interesting. Because 3 weeks ago, you told your sister Karen that I was worthless here, just taking up space. You said I was clinging to life without dignity. You discussed redecorating my home after my death, as if I were already gone. Her face went white. You heard that. I hear many things, Jessica. I also remember them. She started to cry then, real tears of desperation, rather than the crocodile tears I'd seen her use on Michael. Please, Mrs. Henderson. We have nowhere to go. No money saved. Michael's job prospects aren't good, and with my credit. That sounds like a series of choices you made, I replied. Not problems I created. But I wasn't completely heartless. That afternoon, I called Michael into Harold's study for a private conversation. He sat in the chair across from the desk, looking like a child called before the principal. I want you to understand something, Michael, I began. I didn't make this decision lightly or in anger. I made it from a place of deep disappointment and self-respect. Mom, I know I should have defended you more. I know I should have stopped Jessica when You should have. But more than that, you should never have needed to be reminded to respect your mother. That should have been automatic, instinctive, non-negotiable. He hung his head. I failed you. You did. But failure isn't permanent unless you choose to make it so. I opened the second folder from Harold's desk. Do you know what this is? He shook his head. This is documentation of every penny I've spent supporting this family over the past year. Groceries, utilities, insurance, the car repairs for your vehicle, Jessica's medical bills when she had that dental work done. It totals $23,847. His eyes widened. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't realize. Because you both assumed I was living hand-to-mouth on Social Security, barely scraping by. You never asked about my finances because you assumed there was nothing to ask about. Where did the money come from? I smiled then, probably the first genuine smile I'd allowed myself in months. Your father was a very, very careful man, Michael. And I was a very careful woman. We saved, we invested, we planned for the future. My future. I let that sink in before continuing. I am not poor, Michael. I am not dependent on anyone's charity. I am not a burden who needs to be managed or tolerated. I am a 72-year-old woman with options, resources, and the legal right to decide who lives in my home. How much? He started, then stopped himself. Enough, I said simply. More than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to travel if I want to hire help if I need it, to maintain this house exactly as I choose. Mom, if we had known. If you had known I had money, you would have treated me with respect? That's exactly the problem, Michael. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's bank account. Love shouldn't require a financial statement. He was quiet for a long moment. What can I do to fix this? You can accept the consequences of your choices. You can find your own place, build your own life, learn to stand on your own feet instead of expecting others to carry you. And then we'll see if you've learned anything from this experience. The last week of their stay was surreal. Jessica packed their belongings with the careful precision of someone who couldn't afford to leave anything behind. Michael spent long hours on the phone, calling everyone he knew who might help with employment or housing. Neither of them mentioned the money they now knew I had. Neither of them asked for help, loans, or handouts. Perhaps they finally understood that my wealth wasn't the point. My dignity was. On their final day, I made pancakes one last time. The kitchen smelled of butter and vanilla, exactly the way it had for 43 years of Thursday mornings. Michael came downstairs first, drawn by the familiar scent. Smells like home, he said quietly. It is home, I replied. My home. He nodded, accepting the correction. Mom, I want you to know. I'm ashamed. Not just of what Jessica said, but of my silence. Of the way I let you feel unwelcome in your own house. Of the way I took advantage of your generosity without even recognizing it. I know you are. Will you? Can you ever forgive me? I flipped the last pancake, golden and perfect, before answering. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Michael. Trust is. Respect is. Those things once broken take time to rebuild. How much time? However long it takes for you to prove that you've learned to value people for who they are, not what they can do for you. Jessica appeared in the doorway, dressed for travel, her face puffy from crying. Mrs. Henderson, I want to apologize one more time. For everything. Apology noted. I said without turning around. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to give us another chance. I set the pancakes on a plate and finally faced her. Jessica, the chance I'm giving you is the chance to discover who you are when you're not living off someone else's generosity. The chance to build a life based on your own efforts instead of your expectations of what others owe you. That's a valuable gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. They left an hour later, their few possessions loaded into Michael's aging sedan. I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away, my heart heavy but my resolve unshaken. For the first time in over a year, my house was quiet. I spent that first evening alone walking through each room, reacquainting myself with the space that was truly mine again. In the living room, I straightened the throw pillows that Jessica had constantly rearranged. In the kitchen, I reorganized the spice rack according to my preferences instead of hers. In Harold's study, I sat in his chair and felt his presence like a warm embrace. I think you'd be proud of me, I told his photograph. I found my backbone. 2 weeks later, Robert Steinberg called with an update I hadn't expected. Dorothy, I have some interesting news. Michael called my office this morning. Oh, he wanted to discuss setting up a payment plan to reimburse you for the money you spent supporting them this past year. All $23,847 of it. I was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. What did you tell him? I told him he'd need to discuss that with you directly. But Dorothy, the fact that he called suggests he's taking responsibility for his debts. That's encouraging. It was encouraging. It was also the first sign that my decision might have accomplished more than just reclaiming my home. It might have sparked the kind of self-reflection that leads to genuine change. Michael called me that evening, his voice humble in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child admitting to breaking something valuable. Mom, I got a job. It's not glamorous, warehouse work, third shift, but it's honest pay. And Jessica found work too, cleaning offices downtown. We're living in a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it's ours. I'm glad to hear that. I want to pay you back. For everything. It might take time, but I want to do it right. That's not necessary, Michael. Yes, it is. It's necessary for me. I need to prove to myself, to you, to Jessica, that I can stand on my own feet. That I can take care of my responsibilities instead of expecting others to carry them for me. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. In that case, Robert can set up a payment schedule that works with your budget. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For the lesson I didn't want to learn but needed to learn. You're welcome. 6 months later, Michael and Jessica came to visit for Sunday dinner. It was tentative, careful, but genuine. They brought flowers, daisies my favorite, and Jessica had learned to make my grandmother's cornbread recipe. Michael helped with the dishes without being asked, and when they left, Jessica hugged me goodbye with what felt like real affection. Thank you for not giving up on us, she whispered. I didn't give up on you, I replied. I gave up on enabling you. There's a difference. They've been making their payments faithfully, $50 a week, every week, for 7 months now. At this rate, it will take them 9 years to pay back what they owe. But the payment isn't really about the money. It's about dignity, responsibility, and the slow rebuilding of trust. I still live alone in my big house in Plano, Texas. I still tend my African violets and polish Harold's wedding ring every morning. I still make pancakes on Thursday mornings, though now I make just enough for one. But the silence in my home is no longer heavy with resentment and disrespect. It's peaceful, chosen mine. My quiet strength didn't come from anger or revenge. It came from finally understanding my own worth and refusing to accept less than the respect I deserved. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply stop accepting unacceptable treatment. I learned that being called worthless by people who depend on your worth says nothing about you and everything about them. I learned that family loyalty should never be a one-way street. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone before others will respect your right to stand at all. At 72 years old, I thought I was done learning hard lessons about love and respect and self-worth. I was wrong about that too. But this time, being wrong led me back to who I really am. Dorothy Mae Henderson, a woman of substance, dignity, and $2.3 million in carefully managed assets. A woman who owns her own home, makes her own decisions, and will never again accept being called worthless by anyone who should know better. The African violets are blooming beautifully this spring. Harold would be proud of them. And I think finally he'd be proud of me too. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, please subscribe for more tales of women who refuse to disappear quietly. Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth. These stories matter, and so do the women brave enough to live them. Remember, respect isn't negotiable at any age, in any family, under any circumstances. And sometimes the quietest women have the loudest strength when pushed too far. Truth doesn't rot. It waits. And when the time is right, it speaks louder than any insult ever could.